Commander Central, episode 204, and today we'll be looking at the triple-digit cost of playing a single-digit format. I'm Dana.
And I'm Max.
Max, how you doing today?
Pretty good. Almost the weekend on this short week.
Yeah, that's nice. A nice short week, and then we have a weekend coming up, and weather's nice. Spring is here. You know, the restrictions and where you can go have been lifted a little bit, so you can get out there and see some of the world with a few less worries. That feels pretty good, at least locally for us. So
yes, that's been very nice, to be honest.
Yeah. Summer is upon us, and it's been a long winter, but feels nice to get out there. I actually got up and wife and I went for a hike this morning, so we did a couple miles through a trail in the woods. That felt nice. Yeah, it's spring, and there's flowers blooming on lilac trees and apple trees and cherry trees, and can't help but be in a little bit of a positive mindset as much as you can, given what's happening in the world anyway. So,
oh, big time. Yeah, it's been a rough week in that sense.
Yes, but we'll not dwell on that.
No.
We'll try to talk about some fun things like Magic. And we actually got to play some games this weekend.
We did get to play this past weekend.
We've been threatening to get in some games with some patron supporters, and we managed to do that on Saturday night, and then we actually got to play a couple on Tuesday night as well with a couple listeners. So we got multiple games in with multiple people over a couple different nights last week, and that was fun to do. I don't know how often we're going to be able to do that. The plan is to do it once a month, I think we talked about.
Yep, once a month is probably what we can shoot for, just with it being summer and schedules and whatnot. So.
Yeah, it's tough to, as it is, I already am like telling the family, like, I gotta go record, or I'm gonna go stream, or like, it's a little tricky to find room, but that was cool. That worked out nicely, getting to talk and play with people that we wouldn't otherwise get to play with, especially this year. Like, you know, there's a lot of people that were hoping for a chance to play some games at various, you know, Magic Fest, Command Fest kind of setups, and that worked out nicely. And you got to, what did you win? You won one game with Dramoka, I believe?
I won a game with Dramoka, and I won a game with Regna and Krav.
And we've talked about it so many times, the ability to forget that you can't cast spells when Dramoka's out. And I've talked about doing it, and I did it in that game.
You and one other player tried to do it.
Yeah, who was the other person?
Rafael Garcia.
Yeah. So that both of us had a way to stop it, and both forgot for like the 10-second window that we had to deal with Dramoka before your turn. So yeah, apparently that card's only been out. In my defense, that card's only been out for like 5 years. You've only had the deck that long, so.
Yeah, totally your defense there.
Right. At some point, I will figure it. At least Raphael, for his first time playing it,
Yep.
There's an excuse there. Not at all for me. So games were fun. We'll get a few more in the future, get some scheduled out, but that was nice. And you got to play a couple at your place with friends, I think, as well at some point in the last week.
We did. We had a buddy over the holiday weekend, just spur of the moment. Hey, you want to come over and, you know, have a couple beers, play some Magic? And apparently when you cast the Great Henge when playing Tulane, it makes the table angry. I don't know why.
Just draw all the cards.
Yeah, that's what I did.
That always feels pretty good.
Yes.
I played the EDH Recast as well on our stream, and we got to play with Sheldon Menery last night, which was super cool. And after Sheldon left, we played a couple of 3-player games with just Matt and Joey and myself. It was, you know, relatively early, and we had quite a few people that stuck around from the stream because Magic Mike did a raid. So we played a couple more games. I played Reki, and I wound up in one game. In the game with Reki, I opened with Wild Growth, which is a ramp, turn 1. Turn 2, I dropped Reki, and then was able to play Mox Amber to draw a card, and then Mox Amber into Soul Ring, I believe.
Oh, geez.
And then Soul Ring into something else, Hopagear or something. And kicked off like one of those games where it kicks off. And then somebody, you know, Matt or Joey board wiped on like turn 6 when I had, you know, 14 creatures in play. And I rebuilt it the entire thing next turn because I had gotten out Vernal Bloom to double forests, and then a Caged Sun and a Nissa. And then I dropped the Mana Reflection.
That's not fair Magic, Dana. That's not fair Magic.
So I actually fought through one more board wipe, and then I had them both down to whatever it was, 8 or 10 life, and then got hit by a Rift mid-attack that I couldn't stop, and that was the end. I couldn't get past the Rift. So I did not win the game despite all of that nonsense. made a little bit of a little arc enemy situation going on, and did not get the win, but it was fun doing stupid stuff. So if anyone out there in listener land has gotten to play some cool games on webcam, or if you've been able to actually play a few in person as things have kind of eased up across the country, how would you reach out to us and share that experience, Max?
Hit us up on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can Facebook message us, CMDR Central. Leave some comments on our YouTube videos by searching CMDR Central, and otherwise just, Google search us. Just don't go too deep.
Absolutely. You can also find us on patreon.com.
Head over to patreon.com/CMDR Central to check out our reward tiers, such as the Decks You Play series, and if you are so inclined to support us financially, we greatly appreciate it.
But we will gladly also just take an upvote or a like or a subscribe. That does a lot of good as well. Anything you can do, we definitely appreciate it.
Yes.
And I think we have a couple new Patreon supporters here to shout out.
We do. We want to say thank you to Christopher DeWitt, Benjamin Collins, and Andrew Nolan.
So this show is going to air on June 1st, and there will be a ban-restricted announcement that day, which, may not be anything being banned or restricted, who knows, but they have said that there's definitely something coming regarding companions. So presumably whatever that will be will also then therefore affect Commander. Any, wild speculations, Max? Since I guess we're going to find out shortly after the show goes live anyway. You want to take a guess on what they might change?
I mean, I'm all for the extremes, so I'm totally fine with them just saying, we screwed up and we're banning the companion mechanic in, 60 card formats. I don't think it is going to be a big issue in EDH. It kind of breeds some creativity when building your deck if you really want to run that companion. But, I've heard a lot of theories. That'd be mine, though. I just hope they ban it in those other formats as the mechanic itself.
I've seen some random things thrown out there, like if you have a commander, you start with one less card in your opening hand or something. So they could do that kind of thing, at least as a trial, and see if it makes enough of a difference over the course of the next month before they go more extreme. So my guess is we're going to see something like that, which would also then trickle down and affect Commander. I'll be curious to see what that does, but yeah. So we will know, I guess, shortly after this show goes live, and we can probably talk about it, whether or not we were right or what we think that will impact starting after the announcement comes out.
There we go.
All right. So let's jump into the main show topic. This was inspired a little bit by the recent announcement of Double Masters and just a general conversation about the amount of product out there, whether we're talking the fancy special editions of cards inside a set or signature spellbook kind of products or, new Brawl, precons, whatever. There's just a lot of things out there, both in terms of product and special cards in the product. And it has definitely affected the cost of cards, as well as just more people playing. And, people got their stimulus check this year that affected the cost of cards. So there's a lot of things that affect the game and the cards from a financial aspect. And we wanted to talk about that. We did this a little bit back in episode 38, which was 7 years ago now.
Yeah, 7 years ago. February feels 7 years ago, so this has to at least be a decade.
You are absolutely correct. So to show you the kind of thing we're talking about here, I listened to that show today to kind of prep for this one.
Oh, wow, I'm sorry.
Well, early on in the show, we mentioned how Mana Drain is down to $80 thanks to reprints, and Mana Crypt is under $100. The cheapest Mana Crypt right now is $120, and the cheapest Mana Drain is $150. So those quote-unquote cheap prices, which are not particularly, $80 isn't cheap, but it is compared to $150. Those prices have all gone back up. At one point, Max, you mentioned spending $50 on a Grim Monolith and how that didn't feel good, but you wanted it for a deck. The cheapest Grim Monolith I could find today, $175.
Wow.
For one that was in lightly played condition, lightly played or better. At one point in the show, right after that, you mentioned Rhystic Study being a $12 card and how much that hurts to pick up. $12 you mentioned. That's $25 now.
I love it.
So even us talking about the cards that had gone up in price and how unfortunate that is have doubled, if not more, in the case of Grim Monolith. So
wow.
Clearly an evergreen issue that hasn't been addressed since way back in show 38. So one thing we did to kind of illustrate this, and it was a little bit more dramatic on the cards I looked at than the ones Max did, but we'll mention his too. When I first got back into Magic, it was in January of 2013. So we're talking 7 years ago, a little more than that at this point, 7.5 about. The first things I did was build a couple of casual 60-card decks. The guy I was playing with at the time had been a former Standard player who hadn't played for a couple years, I think since like Zendikar Block, but he had kept adding cards to his Standard decks. So he had like, at this point, they weren't, I guess they're probably modern legal, but they weren't legal in any other format really. So he had those decks. So I built some ones that, when I say casual, I just mean like they didn't fit in any format. So I built a few 60-card decks too. I placed an order. I could find the full list of cards on TCG Player. So I went through and it looked like I built 6 decks and the order I placed was $93, which isn't terrible, I don't think, for 6 decks necessarily.
No.
Now, adjusted for inflation, that was 7 years ago, I found an inflation calculator, wound up being 103 for inflation. So there's a minor increase there. I then went through and added all of those cards to my cart, and I didn't care about version. So like if there was reprint since then, I was fine adding a reprint to my cart. We went from $103 adjusted for inflation to $261 to buy the same cards today. So that's a 178% increase just on the fairly casual cards I had built for these 60-card decks. Jumping ahead to March of 2013, that's when I put my first EDH deck together, and I went through and made that order. $49 it came to for the cards for the deck. And adjusted for inflation, that's $54.20. So $49.25 to $54.20 essentially in today's dollars. To buy those same cards today, $227.96. So a 363% increase to buy the cards from my first Commander deck today than it would have been than it actually was back in March 2013. I think you went and took a look at your first couple orders too, Max?
I did. So mine are, like you mentioned, are not as polarizing as yours are. So my very first TCG Player order was back in July of 2014. It was just a bunch of random singles for $11.23. I priced it out this morning on TCG Player, only buying the cheapest copy. It was $13. So again, but these were commons and uncommons from like Tempest and Urza's Legacy, which some of those are expensive, but at the same time, they could have had a reprint since 2014. Right. My first Card Kingdom order was back in October of 2017, and it was mostly foils for Brago, and those clocked in at $40.89. If I were to purchase them all today from Card Kingdom, it'd be about $47. So again, the foil market probably hasn't seen as much of a drastic increase, and it's a very small amount of cards. Each of these orders had maybe 20 cards in them versus enough for 6 EDH decks or 6 casual kitchen table Magic decks.
And also, like, in a situation like mine where when you order 100 cards for a deck, that's 100 chances you have to have one card hit that huge spike. Whereas when you're buying 10 cards, your odds are much lower that you're going to hit that one weird. Like, for example, Skithrix was one of the cards I bought. Skithrix was, I think I paid like $2.50 for it, $2.50 for it in that order. And it's, 40 something today. So like it only takes a few of those that like go up some freakish amount to really make the numbers look skewed. And if you buy 100 cards, the odds are much higher you'll hit one of those cards.
Very much so.
So that then got me thinking, I made this purchase, both those purchases, $100 close to it the first time, close to $50 the second time. We'll just round it off and say $150. And I talked to my wife about those purchases just because that's coming out of our, joint account. And I said, I'm looking to play Magic with this friend of mine, and it's going to cost $100 to build 6 decks. She's like, I remember specifically, and her be like, $100 is a good amount of money. And me saying, well, yeah, but I just buy it once and I'm done.
Does that work still? Can you still use that excuse?
Well, so that was my thought. And I really thought that. I was like, I'm going to build like 6 different 60-card decks and we'll just play those in like a rotation, and that'll be it. And I'll have these. It's like buying a board game, kind of. Not that I didn't know what Magic was, but I just didn't think I would get into it. I thought I would just play these decks and that would be it. And kind of the same thing with that EDH deck. I go to buy that EDH deck. I'm like, okay, it's $50 more, but like it's a deck and I'm going to have one more deck to play. That was a relatively easy thing to, her say, okay, yeah, that's fine, whatever. Today, hey, honey, I want to spend $261 to buy 6 Magic decks. That's a lot of money. Not that 100 isn't, but like $261 is way more shocking. Similarly, the difference from going to 50 to $227. It's a
Right.
huge increase as well. And forget like her reaction. If I put that order together and look at it today as someone who's thinking about playing Magic, I want to build 6 decks and I look at it, I'm like, $261. I bet I don't place. I bet I don't place the order. I remember like feeling not super wowed about spending $100. I guarantee if that was me today, I might have like then said, okay, I'm just going to build 2 or something. I wouldn't have bought the cards for 6. Same thing with that first Commander deck. I might have still built a deck, but I absolutely wouldn't have spent $227. I would have dropped out, every single card worth money and probably still spent $50 on it.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference is, at the time, I probably kind of did that. Like, I would bet there were probably expensive, really good cards for that deck that there's no good lands in the deck that I built. There's no Watery Grave in there. So I bought like a bargain version of Watery Grave or something. But like at the time, Skithrix was the bargain version of something, right?
Right.
The drop-offs today, I think, for the most part, what you're looking at in terms of power level, the drop-offs compared to what they were then, you're going to get a much, much worse budget deck trying to build it for $50 than clearly I did back then. And that's also going to change your play experience. The dollar value of what I put together would have scared me off, and so would have the much, much worse deck I would have had to put together to maintain something close to that budget. I feel like that's got to be very, very, I don't want to say bad for the game, but I feel like that's super dangerous. What do you think?
I definitely think it's a huge issue when looking from the outside in.
Yeah.
Looking at saying, oh, if I want to play Commander and not buy a pre-con, it's going to cost me $200 some just to maybe play with my friends once a week.
Right.
I do think that's where pre-cons really come in handy, but at the same time,
you bet.
I think my view personally is skewed a little because we have been playing for, 7 years?
Right.
So like going from, the $50 you spent back in 2013, I mean, I don't expect to build an EDH deck for $50 today.
Well, your perception of what is an acceptable amount of money to spend in this game has changed, then, is what you're saying.
Yes.
So why do you think that is? Has that changed because your state in the life has altered, that you're able to spend more money? Has it changed because you've just gotten acclimated to the crazy prices in the game? What do you think that is?
I think it's a handful of things. The first being I am in a state in my personal life where I have a budget that's set up for all my normal expenses, and then I have my fun money for Magic and going out to the bar or video games or whatever, and I can then look at that and be like, well, I have this bucket of money. How much of it do I want to use for Magic this month? Oh, I really want to build this new deck. Okay, well, there goes the bucket,
Right.
That's kind of how I look at it. Also, I think I've grown accustomed to Magic finance. Like, you kind of know when to look at cards you want to buy. Like, can you wait till a rotation to buy some cards because they might be cheaper for a week or two than buying them at the standard price,
Sure.
I also think it's also has something to do with my ability as a deck builder / player. I know the cards I want to run and the cards I like to run. I want that Watery Grave. I want that check land. I want the cycling dual land or the Triome in my decks because they're just going to make my decks a hair better, a smidgen better,
So psychologically, you've gotten to the point where it would, like, to a degree, bother you to not have some of those cards in the deck?
Yes. Now, I'm not saying that I have to go out and buy that Savannah for my green-white deck, but I feel like my deck would be incomplete without that Temple Garden.
Sure.
I know it doesn't do much more than just a forest or a plains or a guild gate or the gain of life lands, but I want that Temple Garden. I've grown accustomed to my decks having shocks, so I want the shock if I can get the shock.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned this. I think it was on the power level discussion, the EDH Rec Room thing that I did with Matt and Joey that was on YouTube last week. Joey was asking about building budget decks and if we had problems with power level, that kind of thing. And one of the things I mentioned was, because I've been playing now for 7-ish years, I have a stockpile of cards that I might not have had I definitely didn't have when I started out. So you can kind of take that for granted to a degree. I picked up a bunch of strip mines when strip mines were, $3, or kept them when I found them in collections or whatever, because I knew every commander deck I built till the end of time would have a strip mine in it. So whenever I found one or saw one, hey, it's a moderately played strip mine in this binder for $1.50. I'm going to buy that. I'll put it in a deck. I stockpiled on those. Now they're $25. Somebody else might have to say, oh man, do I just run a Ghost Quarter instead? Which is a perfectly reasonable swap. I don't have to do that. I could just be like, I got a stack of strip mines. I still have, like, literally, aside from the ones in my decks, I think I have 8 strip mines sitting here. that I can just put in decks because I don't have to think about it because they didn't cost me anything. I mean, they cost me $2 or, whatever, but like they were essentially nothing when I got them. The other one I mentioned, and this is the same way, is Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, which is, I want to say, close to a $40 card now. But when I picked them up, which was an M14 or whatever it was, did quite a few drafts that summer, cracked a few packs, whatever. I picked up half a dozen Urborgs, and now when I build a black deck, I don't have to think about, okay, is it worth breaking my budget for that Urborg because it's a $2 card in terms of like what mentally it is to me. I know it's more than that, but I don't have to think about it because I just have it and I got it when it was $2 and it's sitting here in my stock to use to build decks. So I'm, to a degree, because I've been playing long enough, I'm a little bit divorced from the realities of some of these costs because I was lucky enough to get a lot of these cards when they were relatively cheap and when I could build that deck for, $40 or whatever it was. Talking about some of those, like even those 60 card decks I put together, one of them was a Enchantress 60 card deck. So there was like 2 core Spirit Dancers in there and a couple Mace Enchantresses and like an Ancestral Mask. And there wasn't a Sarah Sanctum or anything, but like there was a lot of cards in there that are now, $3 or $5 or $8. There was an Argolian Enchantress in there that at the time, I think that was one of the cards I splurged for in those 60 card decks was one Argolian Enchantress that was like, $350 at the time or something. That's, $12 or something now. That's also then, like, even those cards have kind of let me be divorced from it. I can grab a, Mother of Runes, I guess that's been reprinted a lot, Academy Rector. I have an Academy Rector because I picked one up for a deck way back in the day, and it's like I'm lucky enough to kind of dodge some of that stuff because I was in the right place at the right time. So that's a weird thing for me that I've really noticed lately is being able to just not participate in a lot of this nonsense regarding prices.
And you bring up the point of not participating. I also think the fact that I don't brew a lot of decks in a calendar year, unlike you or even some of our listeners and really good friends, they build brand new decks monthly, weekly, you know what I mean? And
yeah,
granted, they're building them out of most likely their collections at home because they just want to change a pace. But I'm the type of person that I build a deck, I want it to stick around for a year or two. So I think that also makes me okay with spending more money because this is what I'm going to do. This is my new deck for the year.
Right.
I don't care. I'm not going to have to do this again unless I really want to, 6 months from now.
Well, like I'm putting together a black-white pestilence deck right now, and I had to order or get some singles from my LGS for that. I needed like 20 singles, and they had 17 of them. I just bought the last 3 from TCG Player, but those were all like 20-cent cards, 50-cent cards, whatever, for the most part, because I've built Orzhov decks before that I've then since taken apart. So I had the land base together. And actually, when I took the last one apart, which would have been
12 mana Tesa.
Yeah. Yeah, 12 mana Tesa, that's right. I just actually kept the land base and a bunch of the staples in the deck box. So I took like the cards apart, but whatever deck I build is going to have 3/4 of this mana base. Maybe I'll add a few different things depending on what the deck wants to do, but like it's still going to want a Goddess Shrine, and it's still going to want an Isolated Chapel or whatever it is. So I just left those sleeved up in the deck box along with, a Swords to Plowshares and a Path to Exile and a Smothering Tithe and the
Mana Rocks and everything you would normally put in an Orzhov
Signet
deck.
And right. So again, I had to buy some singles for that deck, but it was just like the weird specific ones for it. Again, I get to kind of dodge those costs, unlike a brand new player who looks at the same deck and goes, okay, I want to build this, and then I would have to spend, $400 or something. And if I had to spend $400 in that deck that I just put together right now, I probably wouldn't do it.
Right.
If like I had to buy all these cards for the cost they are now versus the cost they were when I originally picked them up, I probably just wouldn't build it. So I think that's a little bit, basically, this has been a 15-minute bit about us owning cards, but I feel like that's a very dangerous place for the game's long-term health, I think. If people just wouldn't brew decks if they didn't already have cards, you're making it difficult for new players to come into the format, right? Do you think that's the case?
Oh, I definitely think that's the case. People with larger back stock at home have an advantage.
Yeah.
I'll be upfront. I am terrible at organizing my cards. I mean, you could walk down here into the Dungeon of Love and see tons of 5K boxes and Tupperware and holiday boxes filled with commons and uncommons that aren't really sorted. I have some other 5K boxes that are at least sorted down to like, these are all the blue commons and uncommons. And then I also have a box of just what at the time would be bulk rares. And that is definitely something I need to go through once a year. at
Right.
least and be like, oh, because Chandra's Ignition is no longer 97 cents. It's
Right.
$5, or Blasphemous Act is $8. And I'm not looking up prices, people, so I might be wrong. This is just an arbitrary numbers I'm throwing out.
But that's kind of the point. Like, there's some of these cards that we've done that before lately, where we're like, how much is that card now? The reason we don't like know exactly is because we've got them from when they were nothing.
Right.
So we get to
were
dodge
bulk
that.
rares. Yeah.
You bet.
I mean, I think that definitely comes with its advantages and disadvantages. The big disadvantage is, for me personally, is I value my time way more than wanting to dig through my bulk.
Sure.
So, like, I have binders. I have 4 or 5 binders up in my living room with, like, my rares that when I did the binders last were more than $4 or something or whatever. So I always kind of have an image in my mind of what I'm pretty sure there's XYZ card in the binder. Let me go look. So I always will spend time going through my binders for those type of cards, but I don't want to spend, a couple hours digging through my bulk rare box that isn't organized very well, or my bulk commons and uncommons, because those aren't organized, and I'm not going to spend 20 minutes to 45 minutes digging through my blue box looking for a very specific counterspell or a weird creature from Journey into Nyx.
Right.
I would rather just pay the 15 cents on Card Kingdom or TCG Player or Flipside Gaming and order it.
Yeah, no, I've been there for sure. So that kind of then segues into another thing that I've been thinking about lately is the pre-con decks. That's really your only entry then, basically, I think, for new players. I built my first deck from scratch. I don't know if you can really do that. I think you have to buy a pre-con today. If you're new to Magic and don't have cards at home, given the price of all this stuff, I feel like that is probably your best way to get in. We're talking about it's difficult for players to get into the format. Well, I guess that's the one exception, is they are releasing these pre-con decks, or even the Brawl decks that you can pretty easily convert over. And I guess the assumption is you slowly start to morph those by adding new cards, which then leads to my thought of, okay, so do I need to start reviewing those decks and looking at them as something for new players almost exclusively? Because I don't think they used to be that way. I don't think Commander Precons were something that were just for new players. And I'm wondering if that's not how Wizards views them now. And I'm wondering if maybe we shouldn't look at them through that lens too. What do you think of that?
I think that's a great idea, and I think that's a really cool way to look at precons specifically for Commander, as maybe these are more geared to new players versus us tenured players who are mainly interested in them for the 50 new cards they distribute over all 5 decks plus whatever cool reprints we get.
Yeah, that's kind of where I agree. I'm kind of falling down to that line of thought as well.
That said, and I'm going to put a little asterisk on this statement because we are in the year of Commander. I don't know what 2021 is going to bring, if they're going to follow through with the whole, let's release 2 Commander decks with every big standard set. I don't know if they're going to continue that next year.
Right.
Based on previous years, I don't like looking at the Commander precons as the one entry point for new players for Commander, because they really only get released once a year.
Yeah.
Your LGSs typically get sold out pretty quick because of all the tenured players wanting to pre-order their box of them. Or you get lucky and you hit up a Walmart or a Target or your local big box store and they have a couple, but you don't really know what you're doing. You just pick it up because, oh, my LGS was out of it and I want to play with my friends. I think there needs to be something that you could be like, hey, look at this legend from the core set. And now here's a guide of all the cards in standard. You could probably standard or I guess historic. Is that what they play on Arena now?
I think so.
So here are all the cards from maybe like the last 8 sets that have been in standard. Here are all the cards that would turn this one legend into a really cool Commander deck. Because those should all still be reasonably inexpensive.
Yeah, that's true.
Most likely there's at least some sort of dual land in those 8 sets between, a shock, a check land, a cycling land, stuff like that. I think there just needs to be either, maybe that's something we start doing, is we just help people build their first Commander deck based off of a random legend from the newest set or something, and go only use cards from X amount of sets, because that's what people are going to do. They're going to go to their LGS, they're going to find this cool card they cracked in a draft, or off the pack they got for their birthday because they just started playing Magic. And they want to build this Commander deck, so they just start digging through the bulk bins or the big 5K boxes that are organized at some LGSs. They just start digging through like, oh, I like this card, I like this card. And now they have a commander deck.
Well, that's a good idea. So let's maybe make it a point here once the core set comes out, because I'm sure there'll be a bunch of legends in there, given it's, again, the year of Commander. Let's make sure let's grab one of those, and we'll do like, okay, if you have a friend who's a new player who doesn't want to buy a precon, here's what we're going to suggest you use to kind of, maybe we could do a kind of a semi-live brew even with a really low budget. So we can say, okay, your friend can listen to this, and we'll walk you through how to build, Odric the Avenger, if we get a new Odric card or whatever it winds up being. So yeah, that's a good idea. We should definitely do that.
Odric. I like that.
I do too, actually. Boros Odric. I'm all aboard for that. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's talk reprint sets here, because we do have this double master set coming out, which is cool. We've liked reprint sets in the past. It does, when we did this previous show, it was when the reprint set had just came out, a new master set, and it had knocked some of the prices down on those big cards at least a little bit, even though they've since gone back up. Double masters has twice as many rares and twice as many mythics potentially, twice as many foils. So it should be a good way to get cards out there. However, we're looking at a $300 price point for a box. And what are they talking, like 12 to 15 for packs, maybe?
Yep, and I like a typical Masters set. These are only going to have 24 packs in them.
And they're not going to be available anywhere but your LGS, which I guess is good for your LGS. But that also, those things all limit how many of those cards are going to go back out into the ecosystem.
Very true.
So what's a solution then? Do they need to, because we hit a saturation point, I thought, in the past where we had like 3 master sets in a year, and they're like, okay, we're going to stop doing them now. But the prices have then got, shot back up. Have they just not found the balance yet? What are your thoughts there?
So first off, I believe I saw this on Twitter. I don't remember who posted it, but it was exactly 18 months from the announcement of we're no longer doing master sets to the announcement of double masters. 18 months. That kind of makes sense, seeing that sets are designed years in advance.
Sure.
So, okay, I get it. PR didn't really work out that well, but whatever. I don't know. I have some weird opinions on these reprint sets because I love them. I always try to get a box of the yearly master set just because I want more Ancient Tombs or Mana Vaults like in Ultimate Masters, right, or Eternal Masters. I need Divining Tops and Force of Wills and whatever other good cards were in Eternal Masters, because that was 7 years ago.
Right.
So I know Double Masters coming out. I'm pumped because although it's sad we don't have Magic Fest this year,
yeah,
all the money I have been
setting
aside for food and fun and games and travel, that I would have paid for is just going to go to Double Masters now.
Right.
So I am financially prepared for this. I understand not everybody is in that position. I 100% understand that.
For sure.
But again, I love these. I don't care what art of a mana crypt I get. I just want more mana crypts. I want more doubling seasons. I want more, whatever other cool cards we're going to see. More Traxas,
And I get why that $300, I probably won't buy it. There's just nothing I mentioned I have a stockpile of cards as it is. There's nothing I'm super looking for. I'm not really into playing kind of the pack lotto, at least right now. Maybe that'll change. But I understand why it's off-putting to see a product come out and be like, $300? I just want to play Magic and buy some packs. I can't afford that. It's not doing anything for me. My response to that, and I get that knee-jerk reaction though, is that does drive the price down on things. And it's not just driving the price down on that mana crypt and that mana drain, like we mentioned in the previous show, that they had dropped, 25, 30%. It also takes that cultivate from $2.50 down to $1. Or it takes that, fact or fiction from, $2 down to 75 cents. There for a while, I remember even foils. A foil brainstorm, for the longest time, was $75 or $80. You can get whatever master's version of brainstorm, and I think it was also in one of the, I don't know if it wasn't Conspiracy or it was a Battle Bond, one of them. Same thing, you can get a foil brainstorm there. Those prices have all plunged on even some of the foils because of those reprint sets. So it's not just, people looking to buy mana crypts and mana drains and Force of Wills. It does knock down the price of those utility cards, and that's what turns that $20 TCG player order into a $14 TCG player order for someone who can't afford the $300. I do think those master sets are useful for the people that can't afford them anyway.
I agree in the sense that it helps the 99 cards, the cultivates, the Kadama Reaches, the Factor Fiction, stuff like that. I totally agree that those help lower the prices of those, but at a certain point though, most sellers aren't going to sell anything for less than 10 cents. So
sure,
eventually they're going to bottom out
so far.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, if Cultivate gets printed in this, and then it gets reprinted in, like, a Commander deck and a dual deck, even though they don't make those anymore, well, there were 3 printings in a year, and still, it's only, 15 cents. I don't know. It does help for new players because now they're only spending little bits of money.
Right.
Because I do remember back in the day when Kadama's Reach, the most recent printing was, like, the Modern Masters reprint, and that was how old at the time.
Right.
But I think where these putting more into the system doesn't help are the rares and the mythics, because at this point, it's hard to sell your cards right now. It's hard to, you can't go to a Magic Fest and unload all these rares and mythics that you crack in a Master's box that you don't want or need,
Right.
and you just want to flip them. Most online sellers, their buy lists are just starting to ramp up again because of COVID-19.
Yeah. Well, right. So that's the corollary here. Like I mentioned how the prices on the Cultivate drops, but it's not just the prices on the Cultivate that drop. That stuff, I guess, Cultivate goes back up. But like I remember at our shop, 5 years ago or whatever it was, a couple people were trading, and there was like a kid in there, and I want to say he was 16-ish, and had a trade binder with a handful of things in it. And his only mythics in this binder was he had 2 Angels of Serenity, which were Return to Ravnica, I believe.
Yes.
And Angel of Serenity was like a $7 or $8 card at that point in time. So it's like, it's not worth a ton, but like at that, he could have leveraged that into, again, probably a Shockland at the time. Those were roughly the same price. He could have leveraged that into 3 or 4 $2 cards or something. Then Angel of Serenity got reprinted in, I think it showed up in Commander 2015. The price just tanked. It went from that an $8 card to a $1 card. And looking right now, it's back up to like $1.20. But those reprints knock the price of Mana Crypt down, $30. And then Mana Crypt bounces back because Mana Crypt was printed as a mythic in an expensive set. There's only so many of them being opened, and it does knock the price down a little bit, but that price immediately rebounds back to where it was, versus that Angel of Serenity, when that gets reprinted, that just tanks and doesn't come back. Or if it comes back $1 or something. And so that kid's only trade fodder he had is now worth nothing.
Yep.
Whereas the person who's sitting on 3 or 4 Mana Crypts just waits 3 months and his value just magically comes back. So that's the downside. Some stuff gets cheaper for you to run for staples, but if you're holding on to cards in that $5 range, Black Market's one that always jumps out at me. Black Market was like a $10 or $12 card, and then they just put it in everything. It was in 3 Commander Precons or whatever it was, and, just drove the price down on that, and that's probably not going to ever bounce back. So if you were somebody who's like, the only cool card was a Black Market at the time, you just lost a bunch of your value on that Black Market that won't come back.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if they can do anything about that. Some stuff is just going to be weird, and it's just going to happen. But right, that's the downside of reprints. I think it hurts the small player way more than it hurts the big money people that are holding a bunch of big cards.
It definitely does. And, you kind of made a point, but it also determines what card you're holding on to. You made the great analogy between the Mana Crypt and the Angel of Serenity, but, the cards that have been previewed for Double Masters so far, Doubling Season, Atraxa, Kalia, Mana Crypt, those are all going to drop a little bit when Double Masters hits.
Yeah.
And I bet all of them but Kalia bounce back
Absolutely.
within 6 months.
They will be temporarily cheaper, and then not only bounce back, given what we've seen in the past, they might go up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the great example I can always remember is when Austere Command got that iconic Masters reprint.
Yep.
Austere Commands were like $2 a piece, and I think you bought a couple playsets worth because it's an EDH staple. I'll use the word staple. It's now back to $10.
Yeah.
Like, boom. And that was 2 years ago? 3 years ago?
Ancient Tombs having that conversation when that was it was Eternal Masters or Iconic, whatever it was.
It was in Ultimate. So just 18 months ago.
Yeah. It went down to, I think it broke 20, but not by much. Might have been end of 19 or something. And it's back up, I think, close to 30.
Let's see. The cheapest one per Scryfall is the From the Vault one at 37. But, non-foil 40.
Yeah.
Tempest
in
is
months.
40.
In
Ultimate
18
Masters
months,
is
that
45.
doubled back up.
Yeah. I mean, it all comes down to what cards get played. Like anything.
And Ancient Tomb is one that can go in literally every commander deck.
Yes.
If you are willing to, pay that price, which a lot of people are. So similar to this, then, we now have this thing where in addition to foils in boxes, we get, box toppers or special frame for extended art or extended art, special frame, box topper. So there's a bunch of different variations on these cards. And when we were getting expeditions a few years ago, one of the things that worked out kind of nicely with those is they kept the price of the non-expeditions under control. When you could just get a expedition version of the Battle for Zendikar lands, for example, for $30, it kept the non-expedition ones at, $2 or $3. And I think those are all still relatively cheap, even though they're pretty decent lands. But the pimp version then keeps the small version down. However, again, if you are a relatively small-time player and you play an F&M once a week, and if that, say once a month even, buy 1 or 2 packs when you're at your LGS, or buy a pack when you're checking out at Target or something, and you crack that mythic version of a card, but it isn't the special mythic version, the value of that card isn't quite what it once was, because the chase version of it is the borderless box topper alt frame alt art foil. Right. So on one hand, it's good. I think it's good for the game kind of in a general sense, because it does, if you don't care about the version of your card, it makes it a little bit easier to build decks because those versions are less in demand. On the other hand, if you don't get those cards in the draft or in the few packs you buy, and the odds are pretty low, you won't. Odds are high that you're going to get the non-special version if you even get a good rare. It keeps that value depressed. So I think it makes it difficult for the average small-time player to then build a collection like we were able to build.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know how to fix that other than just not printing cool cards. And they're not going to stop doing that.
I don't think you can. I think this is where the idea of booster packs are a lottery.
Yeah.
So for a smaller time player that wants that, and I'm going to use Oko as an example because that's the last chase multiple version card I can think of coming to mind. If you really want that borderless full art foil Oko, well, one, it's only in the collector booster, so now you're already looking at $30 for a pack.
For one pack with one chance at it.
Yep. Is it worth it to spend the $30 to hopefully crack it? Or when Oko was at its prime and not banned or anything, that was a $60, $80 card. I mean, I get it. As I've been in that position, I'd rather take the chance, having fun cracking that booster, hoping to pull that Oko that I want, versus shelling out an extra $50 just for the single copy of the card.
Yeah.
So, booster packs are fun to open. Are they how you should be aiming to get your cards? No, not in my opinion.
You have to factor the fun in opening a booster pack into the cost. Part of the money you're paying is because you enjoy opening boosters. Because if you're not factoring that in, you're spending too much money.
Right.
For sure.
I also, what keeps ringing in my head is this is a collectible card game.
Yeah, it is.
If it wasn't a collectible card game, cards wouldn't have a resale value. You know what I mean? This isn't like Netrunner where it's a living card game. You buy the box and you get everything you need to play with no matter how many players.
Yeah.
So if you want that doubling season, you either wait to hopefully crack one in Double Masters or you go pay the $50 at your LGS or TCG Player or Card Kingdom or Flipside Gaming and you buy one and they mail it to you.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of get hung up with all the current arguments and discussions going on social media with, this is costing too much money and they need to figure out a way to make more of the reprints happen. Well, then what's the point of this being a collectible card game? If you print so many mana crypts to where they're, $45 a piece, and I know that's still a lot of money, but compared to the $200 they are now, that's a huge price drop. The big time collectors out there are going to be like, okay, I'll buy $800 worth of mana crypts at $40. Sure. Now I have 20 of them, and then you just wait because, Wizards realized we printed this too hard. We're almost into a Chronicles thing again. Let's hold back on reprinting all these powerful cards that the Commander players want for 3 years, and now that Mana Crypt is now $300 a piece.
Well, and okay, so I get a call tonight, say, from one of my friends who's like, hey, I want you to come sub in my softball league. It's been a few years since I've played softball, so I go sub, and it will cost me next to nothing. I'll have to buy a couple beers or something there. I have a baseball glove, I'll just put on a pair of shorts and a t-shirt and go play. And then I say to myself, man, I really miss playing softball. So I'm going to sign up for his league and just, get a regular slot in that team. But hey, if I'm going to play on a softball team, even if it's just a beer league team, I still want a decent glove. And my baseball glove is, 15 or 20 years old and it's got actual tears in it where some of the seams are and stuff. I'm like, I will need to get a decent glove because this one's, beat to heck and back. I can't be out there, playing again, even if it's just a rec league softball game. I should have a pair of cleats on.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, hey, I'm borrowing someone's bat, but like, I don't want to risk denting someone's bat or something. That's doesn't feel good to do. I need to buy a bat too, and then probably a duffel bag to carry it all in. And then I'm going to spend, money on entry fee to get in the league. And I'm going to spend, $10 on beer and maybe get a burger or something at the field when I play. Any hobby you have is going to take some amount of money to participate in for the most part. Even if you're just like went hiking in the woods with my wife this morning, but I have a nice pair of hiking shoes I wear. Yes, I could wear a pair of beat up old tennies, but I'm not going to risk rolling my ankle. I'm not going to, enjoy it like I will if I can wear a nice pair of steady shoes that are stable and keep me from getting hurt and feel good in my feet. I could not wear bug spray, but then I'll get bit by bugs. You can do most things for next to nothing, but like if you want to do them in an enjoyable way, it does cost money. And there's always going to be some aspect of that in Magic as well. You're going to have to spend some amount of cash to play. That's the reality. It's like any hobby out there, period.
I totally agree with that, and it just is depending on how much you want to spend to put into that hobby. I don't think we've said this yet this episode, but nobody's forcing you to buy Double Masters. Nobody's forcing you to buy the collector booster box of Ikoria. Like, that's your personal decision. Good on ya if you do, good on you if you don't. But that's what you got to remember. You don't have to buy these products that Wizards is pushing towards us every 3 months.
Well, and WotC isn't your friend. They don't. Number one, they don't owe you a game that's affordable, but also you shouldn't expect them to do something that's good for you. For the most part, you should assume they're going to do what's good for them, because that's just how companies operate. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, but that's the reality we live in. Companies tend to make decisions based on what is the most beneficial thing to their bottom line. And if you expect them to do something differently, you are usually going to be let down. So my expectation is WotC's going to do what's good for WotC, and in that case, it's maintain the price of some of these expensive cards as a thing that people want to chase. And they've made a lot of money, and Commander's as big as it ever is. It's good for them, even if it maybe isn't good for me, or maybe isn't good for the game long term, or maybe isn't good for getting new players in. It's at least good enough for them right now. And I expect them to keep doing what's good for them right now. I'm not defending that. Again, I can't stress that enough. Maybe it's terrible behavior, but like it's what they're doing. It's what they're going to keep doing. And the reality is that's how companies operate. So I don't know if we should have any different expectations, I guess maybe. It would be nice if, but that's not the world we live in, I don't think. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. And it's not even WotC at that point. It's Hasbro at this point
for sure.
in the spectrum. It's Hasbro saying, cool, Magic makes WotC a lot of money. That means they make us a lot of money. Let's keep making things that these players will buy. Whether it's the Gems in Arena or Double Masters or Commander decks with every standard set,
Yeah, so I guess I'm trying to think of a way to put a bow on all of this, because I can't really decide where I'm coming down. We've complained about a lot of stuff, but I also feel like I understand why it's the way it is, and I also understand why I think they're not going to change it, because they don't have to and they don't want to, as long as it's making them money. So that leaves us a choice of either accepting it or putting Magic, I guess. I don't know what. I don't know if there's. It seems really binary to me. You either deal with it or you don't, and I can agree it's unfortunate, but I'm not going to quit playing either. So I know. Do you have any final thoughts here?
I mean, my final thoughts are this: this is a collectible card game.
Yeah,
there has to be some sort of value on these pieces of cardboard to make them desirable. Besides the fact that they look pretty or they're powerful in the game. Second is, I'm all for these reprint sets, these fancy cards. Yeah, cards are expensive, but again, like I said earlier, I think we're both in a position in our life where we can smartly choose which cards to buy and when and how to make them affordable for us personally.
Yes.
And finally is to remember that some of these powerful cards that they're reprinting maybe aren't necessary to make sure you still have fun.
Absolutely. That's very true.
Mana Vault is powerful. Not Mana Vault. Mana Crypt. I will always screw that up for eternity. Mana Crypt is powerful. I used to run it in Dramoka. And I mean, I've said it in the past. I said it on this show. I would love to have a Mana Crypt in all my decks. But what I found out is Mana Crypt in Dramoka specifically, if I didn't see it in the first 14 cards I drew, it kind of was a dead card late game.
Sure.
You want it for the explosive start, not the an additional land on turn 12, in my opinion. But that's just my thoughts. I agree. We haven't really come to a great conclusion, except for we both, it's a game we love to play, so we're going to find a way to play it no matter what.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at too. I would like them to do a few different things to make things more accessible for other players, but they're not going to, I don't think. So I guess I've resigned myself to the fact that this is how the price structure is going to continue to go, and that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So maybe that will change. I think the best thing they can do is just keep putting out reprints as many as they can. I guess if I did have one thing I would say, I think the Battle Bond / conspiracy style sets probably do the most good because they're $3 packs and they can still put a few big bomb doubling season level cards in those packs, which make it much easier for the average person to gather than they are when they're in a $12 or $14 pack. That would be the one thing I'd like to see them do more of those things, and that would be good for everybody. But, some of this is just here to stay for the better or for the worse. That's the way it is. So let's try to enjoy it to the best of our abilities.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I'd like to hear what people have to say about this. I don't know if we came to any solid conclusions or anything, but I think this was kind of us just talking out loud more than anything. I guess you always talk out loud.
Yes.
Us thinking out loud is what I meant to say. If you would like to get a hold of us, you can find me on Twitter at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDRCentral_Max, and you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. Our show is edited by Rafael Garcia. You can find him at Ursa Bearwalker. And our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty, licensed via Creative Commons from Kevin MacLeod. We will be back next week with another show. Until then, I am Dana.
And I'm Max.